All right, welcome to the program Wednesday afternoon. And for the first time in several weeks, we are doing Midweek with the mayor at Midweek.
Right on schedule.
Yeah,
We're back on track.
Our schedules are back. Last week it was on, Friday? And then the week before that it was Thursday, I think it was. And,
totally thrown
so,
off.
Maybe next week we'll try Monday.
So
How
no
about
wonder
Saturday?
no wonder why it feels like Friday to me right now.
I think Saturday. We should try Saturday or Sunday morning or something. I don't know. Just keep it
Just to mix it up, yeah.
Yeah. All right, welcome to the program. Actually, we do make Sunday because we do the best of Barry on Sunday, and this part's included in it. So
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
How early do I have to get up for that?
I'm not sure. I don't get up early. Actually, I think it's like around 10 o'clock. So.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. It's on there. Right, Tim? Is it about 10 o'clock Sunday morning? Best of me? I'm asleep. He's asleep. He doesn't care.
Set your alarm.
He listens to my big mouth all week long. He doesn't need to hear it on the weekend. Right? So how are you?
Things are good. I'm just looking at your shirt. I think we should share it with the listeners.
Yeah, well,
the Barry
the
Richards
viewers
Show.
Can see it.
Yeah, it looks great. It says the Barry Richards Show on the front, 1420 WBSM.
Well, I'm the king now,
Yeah, and I like the theme. We have You're the King, Phil's the Mayor.
The morning mayor, yeah.
What's Chris? Is he the czar or something?
I'm not sure, but does king outrank mayor? Morning mayor?
Not in this country.
Not in your fiefdom, right? By the way, if you want to, you can go on WBSM, our YouTube page right now, and you can check out there. We are live streaming this. It'll be up later on for everybody to look at on Facebook as well and all that stuff. So, all right, the mayor's with us, and a lot of interesting stuff, as there usually is when we have you in here, and not.
I like to keep it interesting, Barry.
Well, you like to keep it interesting. You feed us lots of good material to use, and not the least of which is this whole thing now with ABC and the recycling.
So we want to talk trash.
We want to talk trash. We want to talk some trash here today. Yeah.
Yes.
So in a nutshell, I guess ABC says, hey, look, China's changed their rules. They're not buying as many recyclables from the United States anymore. They've found their environmental conscience, and so we've got a problem here. We can't sell it to the Chinese, so we may have to change our contract with the city and start charging you guys more to dispose of your recyclables. This impacts 5 communities, including New Bedford. So what's up?
So this is something that's been brewing for, at least 6 months or so. And, let me just say, right up front, we have a good relationship with ABC and the Camara family, which has been running ABC since its founding. The Camara, it's a family-owned business that's employed a lot of New Bedford residents over a half century. And we value that relationship, but it's they're in a tough spot right now. I don't think there's any denying that. Some of it's with their own making. I think there's been some financial decisions, some business decisions they've made over the last few years that have put them in a less strong position financially. And then there's the whole China thing. And so the change in the Chinese national government's policy concerning recycling imports has affected ABC. It's affected everybody in America who's in the recycling business, and probably businesses in other countries that export recyclable materials to China. The gist of it's this: at some point, so when you get your recyclables collected at your your driveway or your doorstep at your sidewalk, those get picked up and they're sent to sorting facilities, to a sorting facility, and they are bundled.
On Shaman Avenue?
Primarily, but the way ABC does it at more than one site, but that's the primary one. But it happens the same way all around the United States. They're in places that have so-called single stream recycling, which is what we have. You throw all the recycling materials into one barrel, right? And they get sorted out at some plant, right? Plastics go here, glass goes here, aluminum goes there, right? And all of them have some market value, right? So, and whatever it is, however many cents a ton aluminum is and glass and whatever, there's a market for that stuff. And most of that market, most of the demand for those materials is overseas because, there are companies in China and a few other countries, but primarily China, that take that stuff and sell it on to a secondary market. In other words, that there are people who want to buy recycled aluminum so they can make other stuff made of aluminum. the problem has been the Chinese government gets this stuff, and over the last few years, they've expressed concern about about impurities in the material. So in other words, if you have, there's some company buys plastic, but there's food and other stuff in there that doesn't belong in there. It's that represents contaminants that they have to sort out, and sometimes some of those contaminants have, health risks and so forth. And so the Chinese government very abruptly changed their own law that said you can have, I think it was 20% impurities for your bundle of recycling to come into the country, and they reduced it to 0.5%, right? So they dramatically reduced it. And so that's a very hard standard for recyclers to meet. And so that has effectively almost completely shut off imports into China of recyclable material, of lots of lines of recyclable material. So you have companies that are required, like ABC, that are required to pick up recyclable material under their waste hauling contracts, and now they don't have as many places to sell that recycled material because China was the big player in the market. So what does this all mean? It means that, there is a problem. It is a problem. It is a national problem that communities all over America are dealing with right now. But the problems vary in terms of seriousness. It depends on the company involved. ABC has had some problems in the last couple of years they went into bankruptcy. They emerged from bankruptcy again because of by their own admission, some business decisions that they had made. And so, we've asked them, so they've come to us and said, we need the city to pay more. And they've come to us, they've come to a number of towns, Mattapoisett and Plymouth.
Is that to offset their increased cost?
Yeah, so that's what they're asking. So we're saying, okay, so we're willing to talk to you, but we can't write a blank check, right? In other words, to some degree, they bear the risk. I mean, just consider I think people can appreciate this. So let's just use this example. If a kid came to you, knocked on your door in November and said to you, Barry or Mr. Richard, I would, let's assume he's polite, right? I will shovel your sidewalk every time it snows over the course of the winter for $50 the whole winter, no matter how many times it snowed. And you might say, okay, I'll give it to you. So you give the kid $50, and then he comes back to you and let's say April, and there's another snowstorm, and he says, you know what, that $50 thing, I didn't think it was going to snow as much as it has. So can you give me some more? And of course you're going to say, that deal's a deal, right? And so that's the position that our city is in, a number of towns are in, the surrounding towns are in.
But what are the options, before we get too far down the road, what are the options for ABC? Now, if
the problem is that what we've said to ABC is, we haven't said absolutely not. What we've said to ABC is, you've got to show us your books. You've got to, and we've been asking for that for 6 months, and we have not. They haven't done that.
What are their options? I mean, if China is not going to buy this material from them anymore, apparently there are limited markets for this to begin with, right? So if China's the big one, drops out.
Yeah.
Does ABC then start storing this stuff that they can't sell on their property?
Well, they'll have to look for other markets. I mean, China's not the only place that buys it. There is a domestic market, but the domestic market doesn't have the same demand as China. But the point is that the risk that ABC bore when it signed the contract with New Bedford and signed similar contracts with the other towns is that something like this could happen and they would be less profitable. So what they're saying is, give us more money. And we're saying, well, you did bear the risk that you might not make as much money off of this contract as you initially anticipated. So we're not trying to be unfair, but we need to see the books. And just as the kid, who would shovel the sidewalk for the whole winter would say, geez, I thought I would make more money. I didn't think I'd have to shovel as much snow. The same goes with ABC. They bore the risk. Now, we've got to get the garbage picked up in the city. So this is a big deal. That's my primary concern. And I'm also very concerned about taxpayer dollars. We take seriously our responsibility to spend taxpayer dollars wisely. And so we're not just going to say, oh, ABC, you aren't going to be as profitable as you thought you were because of this Chinese policy. Well, we'll just open up our checkbooks and pay you whatever you need to maintain your level of profitability. We can't do that.
Well, what does the contract say in terms of what they do with the stuff when they do collect it? Is it in the contract that they have to ship it out of New Bedford, or is that specified?
No,
so they can
it's
start
assumed. They can't,
storing it here somewhere. If they can't sell it, they can store it here somewhere, right?
They could, but the reality is that for them, I mean, they could do that. I don't know whether they have the room to do that, but that's for them to decide.
All right, so
they make money when they resell the recycled
right,
material.
But there's no specific language about them having to remove it from New Bedford. It can stay here if
not that I'm aware of. I mean, they can dispose of it as they see fit. They can't. I mean, consistent with the law.
Right.
But that's up to them, and they assumed fairly that they could resell it at a price, and they probably didn't anticipate the possibility that market would be more challenging.
I had read some time back that the market is collapsing for this recyclable stuff anyway.
Yeah.
That, I mean, we've just been too good at recycling, and there's just not enough people. It's not profitable for people to recycle this stuff and to use it anymore. So, I mean, have we reached the end of the road, or at least a point where we need to rethink what we recycle and what we do with it?
I don't know. I think that's a great question. I guess I can't. I guess I'm not qualified to answer that question. I know we need to recycle generally, and I probably couldn't speak specifically to the effects of not recycling and what that would mean for our city. Although I will say that if we stop recycling in part or whole, all the things that we recycle now would end up in our landfill, and our landfill would fill up much, much faster. And we, along with the town of Dartmouth, with whom we share our landfill, would have to go looking for another landfill to buy, and that's not cheap. And that's really expensive. And we've done a good job over the last several years in extending the life of that landfill because of the recycling program, as well as other steps. So, and that's saved taxpayer dollars in the long run. So I don't think anybody's suggesting that it would be a good idea just to stick all the recyclable material into the landfill. It's really a question of where else might there be a market for it? If not China, then which other country is there a way to develop a domestic market that once existed but doesn't exist in nearly as large as it used to be? I think that's the question. But as it relates to ABC, I'm not unsympathetic to their plight. But on the other hand, I have an obligation to our city's residents and to the taxpayers to make sure that their money is being well spent. And in a case where, again, like the kid who asked to shovel your snow, they bore the risk that that things might happen that would make this venture less profitable for them. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to work it out, but it's not clear to me that it's going to get worked out easily.
But as a municipality, we have to start thinking about this.
Well, we do. Yeah, we've been thinking about it for a while.
What do we do with recyclables down the road? I mean, we might solve this crisis now, but if the market is shrinking for recyclable material, nobody wants to buy it, then at some point we got to figure out what we're going to do. Now, I know Taunton for a long time was trying to get an incinerator, and the Patrick administration was opposed to it, and never really understood why. But I mean, incineration with today's technology, why can't we?
Well, one of the big things that we're looking at, which is somewhat different, what happens with incinerators, I don't want to sound too authoritative on this because I'm getting a little bit beyond my level of knowledge, but my understanding is with incinerators that, those are generally for, general refuse and not necessarily things like plastics and glass, although I'm not positive about that. One of the things that we are doing right now and have been over the last year is to explore the possibility of building what's called an anaerobic digester, a biofuel facility where organic material, including the sludge from our wastewater treatment plant, as well as so-called FOGs, fats, oils, and greases, all the stuff from restaurants and can be put in, and that facility can generate electricity, can generate natural gas that can power vehicles and things like that. So we've been doing a lot of planning for a facility like that would also go over on Shawmut Avenue, away from neighborhoods. So that's, there's a lot of detail to come with that, but that's another big initiative that we're working on now.
So now, what is it that?
But that's not going to solve the recycling problem here.
Yeah, that would obviously require state.
Yeah, we've been working with the state Division of Environmental Protection on that effort as well, working closely with them. But again, I just mentioned it because these are garbage issues, refuse issues are are becoming more challenging, not just because of Chinese markets, but also because of the lack of available space in eastern Massachusetts for more landfills,
right? And
the reluctance by states, including Massachusetts, to allow the construction of new incinerators.
But this is one of those red flag issues, though. I mean, somewhere down the road, somebody's going to look back and say, "Hey, Mitchell should have done more," or whoever the next mayor is should have done more, or whatever.
I don't think they'll be saying that about me, at least not with a straight face.
Well, you just happen to be sitting here looking at me, so I just said.
No, we're getting out ahead of this. No, we've been dealing with this for several months, and we've brought it into the public realm. We wrote a letter, which I think you got a copy of, back to ABC that says, "Hey, look, we're willing to look at your books, but don't, we cannot just say, name your price, ABC, and we'll pay it. We don't. I don't do that with anybody."
The whole issue of recycling in general. ABC's come and go, and we may have another contract or something.
Yeah, there were a couple of interesting. I mean, if people Google, there's been a couple of articles on this in the Wall Street Journal in the last month or so. I think there was one earlier this week about this problem. It's a real problem, and we want to get it solved, but and to make sure that people's garbage is picked up and the recyclings are picked up. Yeah, but we've got to work through the details and be ready for a contingency plan. We've talked to other potential waste haulers as well, and if I'd rather not go that route, but if we have to in a pinch, then we'll do that as well.
When is Mayor Hoy in Taunton? Is that proposal for an incinerator? Is that still on the table, or is that dead?
I'm not sure.
Because that would have been a regional thing, right?
Yeah. I know Brockton. I've had a number of discussions with the mayor of Brockton, Bill Carpenter, on the matter of incinerators. They incinerate their sludge, and so they've been interested in talking to us about a regional approach to what I was just discussing a moment ago, an anaerobic digester that would take organic waste and convert it into energy.
Sounds almost like a horror movie film title or something.
A little bit. Hey,
yeah, a little.
But hey, look, this is involves big business. It involves big environmental issues, and involves the big constituent issue of waste, of trash hauling. Right? I mean, you can't let the trash sit around, and
so what has been the big objection to an incinerator? With today's technology, we can burn without it causing environmental issues, right?
My understanding is that it's the incinerators in general are not getting built around the country. It's a Clean Air Act issue.
So even with today's technology, we can't burn and
I don't know. You're starting to get beyond my level of familiarity.
Well, I don't know how involved we were in the conversations with Taunton back 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and they really were pushing this thing, and they wanted a regional approach, and they kept running into roadblocks with the Patrick administration. I was told at the time,
I don't think you're not seeing any incinerators getting built under the Baker administration as well. No. So it's not a partisan party thing. It's
Oh no, I wasn't going there. But it's either something like that, or we're going to tie it to a rocket and shoot it up in space. At some point we're going to get we're going to get there. Maybe we can take it to Mars and then unload it there.
It's got to go somewhere, and
we don't have space here to build another landfill, right?
No, certainly not in the city, and even the town of Dartmouth that really doesn't have that land. Our landfill, Crapo Hill, is in the town of Dartmouth. It's just it's connected to the New Bedford Business Park, but it's over the city line in the town of Dartmouth. It's in North Dartmouth.
So when that does reach capacity, we start putting trash on a train and shipping it out that way to New York or somewhere else, right?
Well, what we hope is that so we've extended the life of the landfill. We're closer. I think we're at 17 years now, and before we started to do our overhaul of our trash collection system, where it was lower than that. So we've extended the life, and we have to continue to find ways to reduce what goes in, and having an anaerobic digester of the type I just described can be helpful. If you keep the organics out of the landfill, then that will again free up more volume that will lengthen the life of the landfill itself.
Where are we at with our contract with ABC at this point?
It's a 10-year contract, and we are in year 5, and we the city pay ABC a little bit under, if I remember correctly, a little bit under $5 million a year for the service of hauling away trash and recyclables.
And it's still a cheaper alternative than getting back in the trash business.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, it's just, the cost of municipal, as we've discussed so many times, municipal health care and pensions just adds tremendously to payroll costs.
So what has ABC's response been to this letter, or have you gotten one yet?
Well, Mike Camara, I guess, went in front of the select board in Plymouth last night and said that that they're going to stop picking up recyclables on July 1st, and we don't want that to happen. And so, we've written a letter. We continue to talk to them, but now we're getting we're 6 weeks away from that point. We don't want to. We're not going to sit idly by and just wait for things to wait for that problem to materialize. So we're going to continue to push for some resolution here. And if it's with ABC, then fine and better. But if not, it'll be with somebody else.
So this letter was actually written on May 8th. So last night, which was the 15th, they went before the board in Plymouth and said, we're just not going to do this anymore. Had they told you they weren't going to pick up recyclables?
Yeah, they sent a letter, I think, maybe about a week before then. And so that's a response to a letter that ABC sent.
All right. So they've already told us July 1st, no more. Okay. Yeah. So what do we do on July 2nd? Do we sue?
We're not going to wait that long to figure it out.
Okay.
If we don't think that ABC can do the job, we're going to go with somebody else.
Mm-hmm. So do we break the contract with the trash, everything completely?
ABC has already said they're going to break the contract.
In other words,
they've by saying we're not going to do what the contract requires us to do, which is among other things, pick up recycling. Then they are effectively breaching the contract.
So they won't get trash either. You don't take our recyclables, you don't get our trash.
Well, what we are working with our attorneys to figure out what the best way is, but we're not going to sit back and just sort of wait for events to overtake us.
Is it possible we have two different contracts, one with ABC to take the trash and one with
anything's possible. I want to get the trash collected on trash and recyclables collected on July 1.
All right, so there'll be no interruption of service at all?
That's what we're acting now. We're not messing around. That's why we sent that letter, because we don't want to wait for the stroke of midnight to figure things out.
So are we in talks with other companies at this point?
We have been, yeah.
How many others?
More than one. I'll leave it at that.
More than one? There are several in the area, right? I mean, I know there's like waste management.
Well, there are national companies, but we've been talking to others. We have to.
So what about the trash bins that we currently use? Does ABC own those, or does the city own those?
No, the city.
The city. So there'd be no interruption there. Come July 1st.
No, nobody's going to take away the barrels. No.
Okay, so we'll just keep using the barrels the same way.
Yeah.
And that part of it wouldn't change. Would you anticipate, because of the new demands on the recyclables, that a new contract, if we had to go with somebody else, would be more than what we're paying now?
It may well be, yeah. If we don't have a choice, and obviously that's we prefer not for that not to happen. We've got to pick up the trash and the recycling.
But if ABC, I mean, if it's going to cost us more anyway, why not just stay with the same guy? We just don't know at this point.
Because we have no idea what that's going to be. And
they haven't given us a bill yet and said it's going to cost this much more to do it.
Oh, they have, but we're not going to sit there. That's my point, Barry. We're not going to sit there and say, oh, okay, well, just let me. To whom should I make out the check?
Yeah, no, but I mean, if they're willing to say, hey, look, this is what it's going to cost us more now. Another, I don't know, $2 million is going to cost us that. And so we're talking to other contractors, and they say, well, it's going to cost us, the additional $2 million too. I mean, why not just stay with the guy?
Well, that's a hypothetical. Yeah. And all I'm saying is, if you're going to require the city of New Bedford to pay more money, we want to see the basis for it.
Okay.
I'm not giving a blank check to
Right.
ABC Disposal or anybody else. So I don't do blank checks.
Right. So if they can show you on paper and the other guys you're talking with come in at around the same ballpark amount, then you can say reasonably, okay,
If that happens, it may or may not happen. I don't know, and we don't know until we can actually look at the books.
If they agreed to show the books.
No, we've been asking for 6 months.
And they won't show the books.
They won't show the books. No,
Yeah.
no. And now, Mike is saying, and again, I like Mike personally, but Mike is saying, well, yeah, we'll find a date to do that.
Time's running short. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to allow the city to have a gun to its head and to have to decide to pay up on some undetermined amount. I don't operate that way.
All right. But the plan is right now not to have any kind of interruption of service at all. Come July 1st, everything will be hunky dory. Well,
that's what we're shooting for. Yeah. I mean, we got to get somebody. I can't make that guarantee, but that's exactly why we're dealing with this now and not on June 30th. And right. I'm not going to wait around and let events overtake matters here.
What would be involved in having a new company come in? Because ABC owns a lot of its own space up on Shawmut Avenue and other places, right? A new company wouldn't have that space. So what would be involved in bringing somebody new in? Would they have to acquire space, or would they use the city space, or how would that work out?
That's yet to be determined. Not every municipality in southeastern Mass has a locally based contractor, right? So, that can be worked out. There are ways if they have to come in from farther away, if they have to deploy from an available city-owned site, then we can cross that bridge when we get to it.
So it's possible that
like Fall Rivers, for instance, that company is based in the Boston area. The company that handles their stuff.
Yeah. So it's possible we could have a different launch site in New Bedford where they store their vehicles and that type of thing.
Yep.
Would that be up around the Shawmut Avenue area? Do we have any space available there?
It remains to be seen, Barry.
Do you feel like you're on the witness stand here and I'm cross-examining?
No, I mean, but here's the
no.
So there are lots of questions, and it is fair to ask, and that's the nature of our show, right? This is an important municipal issue. We should be getting this up. Some of this stuff is, subject to negotiation too. So all I'm saying is the city's not writing a blank check to anybody, and we're out ahead of this before the stroke of midnight on June 30th, so that we're not put in a precarious position. I'm not going to let that happen to this city.
All right, good enough. Council involved in this, or is this something that the administration?
Oh yeah, we've been talking to the council about this issue for at least some of the councilors for a good 6 months or so. So many of the, I don't know if all of the councilors, I think at some level they're all in the loop. We began discussions with councilors going back at least 6 months.
Now, do they have to ratify any new contract?
They would.
They would.
Yeah.
Okay. So they'd have to, they wouldn't break the contract. ABC would break the contract if they didn't live up to it. So you guys wouldn't have to officially vote to break a contract. ABC would violate that.
No.
So you guys would just simply vote to establish a new contract.
They would have to approve in all likelihood, a new contract of a certain length. It's and I can't remember what it is offhand, but contracts of certain lengths have to be approved by the city council. Right. I think it's 5 years, maybe 5 years. I'm not sure.
If this does require any more money, where would that come from? Budget's tight. You know that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would probably come out of stabilization, somewhere. So, what we have a stabilization account for a reason.
Very good. Let me take the break. We're going to come right back. 508-996-0500. We'll give the mayor a chance to catch his breath, and then we'll take some calls. We've got some other topics, too, so stay with us. You're listening to 1420 WBSM. All right, 508-996-0500 is our phone number, and we are with the mayor until 1 o'clock and a whole bunch of other topics I want to get into, but there's a bunch of people that want to talk to you about this topic. So
Okay.
let's do that first for a couple of minutes, and then we'll bring up some other things. We'll get an update on the fishing industry and all of that. So right now we're going to start right here. You're up next on 1420 WBSM. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hey.
Good afternoon.
Hi. I'm just calling as a backup to a call I placed last week about the sidewalks on Howard Street.
Yeah.
The boys are here, and they're working diligently, and I went out and gave them an attaboy, and I do appreciate your prompt attention, Mayor Mitchell.
Well, I appreciate it. In all honesty, it wasn't prompt enough. But we talked last week about the orange and then this pink spray paint on the sidewalk, and so we had to make it a priority, obviously. So I appreciate your patience. And those guys do a great job. It's not a criticism of them, but
They are hard workers.
Yep. No, they do a good job, and you'll see a nice sidewalk.
And again, I appreciate it very much, and thanks again.
Appreciate your call. 508-996-0500. You're next with the mayor. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hey.
Good afternoon.
Mayor Mitchell, I know you were talking about the recyclables. Several years ago, I worked for CMS, and my understanding at that point in time was they didn't like to burn plastics because it burns so hot. It's really not something that can be controlled.
Yeah.
And as well as the smoke that it emits. This is just a little bit of general knowledge.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Everything that goes to that plant and other plants like them is ground up, and then it is sprayed into like a giant furnace. They have scrubbers that stop the soot and the smoke from going into the air. And with plastic, again, like I'm sure as you know, where we've had tire fires, they burn so long and so hot that they are hard to control.
Yep.
Well, if you took all the recyclable plastics that are now being shipped overseas and started to burn them, you would have a massive fire that you couldn't control, even though it was in a controlled area. So this is one of the reasons that they don't like to burn the plastics. I know a lot of the issues, and I've heard over the years, because I know the Camaro family, people not cleaning out, like pizza boxes should be thrown into the trash. That is.
But how do you police that, though? How do you police that without having somebody go through everybody's garbage can?
Well, we do that though. We have inspectors who go out and check recycling bins.
Okay.
We're not finding people for that, but we put little notes on with, smiley faces that say, good job with your recycling and keeping out the bad stuff, or frown to denote that it's, you got to keep out the pizza from the pizza box, but as the case may be. But no, I think that's the caller's point answers your really question about putting plastics in incinerators. I think he put it more authoritatively than I could.
I wasn't, and I appreciate your call, my friend. I'm going to hold you the extra tight, but I wasn't specifically talking about plastics. I mean, just trash in general, a lot of paper. And I guess there's not much of a market for paper anymore either, right?
Yeah.
In terms of recycling.
I think there's less of a market
than there was, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, let me take another quick break. We're going to come right back. We're going to talk about the meeting on Saturday down on the waterfront about the fishing industry and where we're going with all that. So stay tuned. You're listening to 1420 WBSM. All right, welcome back to the program, 508-996-0500. And I wanted to ask you about the big meeting on Saturday. I know the senators were in town. There was a meeting down on the waterfront for about an hour with interests in the fishing industry and the various crises there. Did you get any sense at all that there's a resolution to this coming, or was it just a listening opportunity for them to hear what?
Well, there were two things that I tried to tee up for them. The first had to do with the closure of Sector 9 and all of the boats that are in Sector 9 that were affiliated with Carlos Rafael, and the effect that the closure of Sector 9 has had on shoreside businesses as well as on fishing crews. So that was more of a listening session. That matter is heading toward a resolution. It's still a little ways away. It's not like it's going to happen, tomorrow, but it's at least moving along. But it was important for them to hear people who are, rely on the landings from those boats to say what how they're feeling. The other thing that I tried to tee up for them is some of the conflict between the fishing industry and the offshore wind industry, just so, and it's in this instance where they will, both senators will have a role to play in ensuring that as much as we want to promote the offshore wind industry, we're not literally putting barriers in front of the fishing industry. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I've been urging the governor to make sure that when the procurement comes out for offshore wind, which is scheduled for next week, Barry, that it doesn't result in projects that a project or projects, two projects that don't allow for safe navigation of fishing vessels. And there are things that we want. We want to make sure that the windmills are arrayed in a grid fashion as opposed to a scatter plot fashion. You want lines that between windmills that can be navigated safely by fishing vessels. You want larger transit lanes across wind farms, right, that are actually wider. You want these roadways, and you want the roads. Just like the old saying, all roads lead to Rome. We want all transit lanes that lead to New Bedford. Mm-hmm. So that's important as well. And to, make sure that the spacing between the windmills themselves is actually adequate. And that's probably a matter of negotiation that's ranging from like 0.8 nautical miles to 1.25 nautical miles. I'm not sure exactly where that ends up, but we need to have these discussions now, because what happens now, this will be America's first utility-scale offshore wind farm. What happens now is going to set a precedent for wind farms up and down the coast, and it's in a lot of those places where fishermen from New Bedford fish. So that's why we are in the thick of it right now, and hopefully, we'll get we will be able to cultivate a better understanding both at the state and the federal level of the need to make sure that we don't have unreasonable conflicts between the two industries.
And there's also the concern, a separate issue, but related by folks in the industry about space on the waterfront being taken up by the wind industry. Are we able to work that out, do you think? I mean, are we coming to a conclusion with that, or what?
I don't think that's going to be a sticking point in the long run. There are some space constraints now, but we're also looking to develop more of the harbor, especially north of the bridge, that to accommodate both offshore wind as well as fishing as well as other industries. It'll help if we're able, as I've been fighting for a long time, to get money to dredge the harbor from the state, especially the northern harbor, because there are some areas like around the north side of Pope's Island and a few other places where if things are dredged out, you can fit more fishing boats in up around there. We're trying to build an extension of the north terminal that will allow for more boats there. So there's room for expansion in the harbor for more places where boats can go in the long run. So I think that'll get worked out. And plus, in some ways, it's a good problem to have. We want lots of businesses that want space in New Bedford Harbor.
We only have a couple of minutes left, but there's been a bill that's been making its way through the legislature. It kind of died yesterday, sent off to committee on this lunch shaming issue. Does New Bedford have a policy in terms of kids who don't have money for lunch and they wind up running up a bill? For those listening who don't know what we're talking about, I guess this is a problem in some districts where kids don't have the money. They get lunch anyway. Some cafeterias will dump their hot lunch into the garbage and give them a cheese sandwich or something like that, or humiliate the kids in front of the other kids. So there's an effort to get a bill passed. It was suggested yesterday maybe this is something that needs to be dealt with at a local level as opposed to a statewide level. What does New Bedford do with that?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the state bill, but what we have in New Bedford is we have a 100% free lunch policy, and about 70% of the kids in New Bedford, a little bit more, would be eligible for free or reduced lunch, right? Just based on their family's income. And we qualify for a federal program that says, you know what, we'll make up the difference, because there are kids who don't sign up because the theory goes that they feel ashamed to get a free lunch. And we don't want kids going hungry, so the federal government chips in. So that means that there are some kids in the New Bedford public schools, including my 3 daughters, who get a free lunch, whose parents can afford to pay for lunch, but they nevertheless they get it for free. But the idea is that, you know, we're not going to ask anymore. We're just going to make sure we know that you have lots of kids in need. We're going to supplement what already exists in the way of free lunch subsidies, so that, you know, kids can get their food, no questions asked.
All right, so no questions asked.
Yeah.
I know when my kids were in school, I say, and again, not for lack of having the money to pay for it, but I used to get mail from the school department saying you owe, you know, this much money for lunch, and I'd be, what the hell? I give this kid money every day for lunch. Well, you know, he was hungry, so we wanted more food than he had money for, so we tell him I lost my lunch money or I don't have lunch money, and
they don't do that anymore.
Right,
Yeah.
so I'd get a bill in the mail,
which
is, you know, and I'd wonder, well, who authorized this anyway? Who put my kid on a tab? I didn't realize that was a thing. Yeah, put it on my tab and send it to my father.
Now your sons just send you their bar bill, right? They just
Yes,
the bar
exactly.
tab, right?
Yeah, right. So that's not an issue in New Bedford then. I mean, kids are not being. I guess one.
No, because we have this federal program. It's in place in cities around the country, so that's how it gets paid for.
All right. So whoever needs a lunch gets a lunch, no questions asked.
Yeah,
So,
and breakfast too.
All right. So what about kids who do have the money and say, hey, wait a minute, I can use this money to, you know, buy something else, so I'm just going to tell them I have no money.
Yeah. I don't. Well, they shouldn't be saying
that.
They have the money.
Do, you know? So if you got the money,
some of us just look over at other people's plates and say, "Hey, you done with that?"
Yeah, right. How are you going to eat that over there? It's looking pretty good over there. All right, we've only got about a minute left. What do we got here? I know you brought in some stuff too. What's going on this weekend? Anything?
All right, so we have. We didn't talk about aquaculture, Barry.
No, we didn't. We didn't get to it.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
We can talk about, and Sean Gannon we talked about last week, but Red, White, and Brew at the zoo this Friday. That's a good event, 6:30 to 9. That's a huge event that goes to support the zoo. We have Taste of the South Coast on Saturday, and tomorrow. What day is it? I haven't been here on Wednesdays for a while. Friday, we we cut the ribbon at the Irwin Jacobs School. Irwin Jacobs will be there, and we named the new school in the South End in his honor as someone who has been who's as a entrepreneur, as a innovator, has really made history. Every cell phone in the world has his technology in it, and he's been a huge benefactor for New Bedford, especially the school system, and so he's being honored with a elementary school. What's that? I don't know if he knows. I don't know if he knows Siri.
Well, maybe you can fix up a date with something. And the school committee voted for the Sergeant Gannon.
We did indeed. Yes. Yeah. No, that's definitely somebody we want to honor. Just a great person taken way too soon.
Yeah. Taste of South Coast already, huh? This weekend. Wow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Already.
Saturday,
so get
5.
there. Yeah. Good event.
Yeah. All right. Looking forward to it. Mayor, appreciate you coming in as always.
Sounds good, Barry. Thank you.
And we will come back in just a little bit. We will have the next couple of hours wide open. We can talk about the trash situation or some other things that I got on my plate. If you've got something on yours, well, share it, for crying out loud, right? Howie Cars after 3. Stick around. You're listening to 1420 WBSM.